Tonkinak semnol kake mofaseda.
Yeah, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world. I am Silver Suspiria. I am from the Federation Uprising, and this is the Talking Station's midweek show. I'm by myself today, but the guest tonight off camera is Martin Lockhart. He's the CEO of Lockheart Trading Company with Hardly Competent. How's it going, Martin? I'm fabulous. Trying to get through this crazy time that we're in. I am in New York, so under hardcore lockdown. Um, I think things over by you are a little bit lighter, yeah?
Up.
Yeah, I think they couldn't hear you for a second, but I think I fixed it. Why don't you say that one more time?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, people down here aren't probably haven't taken it quite as seriously where I'm at, central U.S. But um, yeah, we're slowly starting to kind of reopen stores and businesses and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely not been as hardcore as New York.
Yeah, well, that's good. And I hope things seem to be turning around a little bit, but we're here to talk about EVE Online and your group. Why don't you give us some history, Martin, about how long have you been playing? Where did you get your start? What gives you the EVE chills?
For sure, yeah. So I actually started in 2006, a little while back. This is a newer character, but it's my main at this point. I've sold off my others over the years. So I started out as well. I tried to be a high sec pirate, but ransoming people in high sec didn't go too well, as I very quickly found out. Concord came and killed me, and after that, someone took me under their wing and kind of showed me a little bit more about what kind of PvP you could do. Started doing more kind of small scale stuff. Actually, anti pirate at one point over in Minmatar space with a really cool corporation called Defenders of Order. They've since kind of shut down a long time ago and but yeah, did that for a while, kind of played on and off for several years. This time around has actually been my most dedicated time playing, and that started about around the war changes, just before the war changes went through early that year. That's really when I really started back on Eve and have stayed very involved.
Gotcha. That person that took you under their wing, are they still playing? I always like to ask that.
Not that I know of. Yeah, I haven't been able to find them since I came back.
Yeah, it's so interesting how people come and go, and those people that get you your first start. I was just talking to the person who I first flew under any fleet. He's long since not been playing, but he was streaming WoW the other day, so I like to try and catch up on people like that if I can.
No, that's awesome. I ran into that kind of one of those corporations that the Defenders of Order. I actually ran into a guy from there who actually is still playing on and off. So it was really good to be able to kind of reconnect with him for the first time, in like 7, 8 years or more.
Yeah, that guy I'm talking about is Biohazard. You can find him on Twitch. He did a lot of work with EVNT, a lot of technical work with streaming and stuff, so he's a good dude.
Okay, nice.
But well, okay. So how did you wind up? Did you create Lockhart Trading Company? I assume you did.
I did, yeah. Originally, I created it as kind of a holding court for my alts, and then a few years ago, during the playthrough before this one, I'd kind of tried to start it up. We got war decked, kind of crushed under that. Everyone, just kind of disbanded and went their own ways, and I became inactive and had to focus on real life for a while. This most recent time, I started back again, just kind of using it as a corporation for my alts initially, and then I kind of looked at everything. I saw the war changes starting to come through, and I was like, well, this may actually be an opportunity to restart something. So that's where as soon as those went through, I had a bunch of stuff planned and ready to go, a little recruitment video ready to post. And then as soon as those war changes went through, I started to make use of them. So,
Okay, so you started in high sec, and right? Is that what you're talking about? And the war deck
yes.
changes
Yeah.
came
Hmm.
through, and
Yep.
you were like, "Oh yeah, that's gonna fix a lot of broken stuff," as a lot of people did, I think, and came back.
Yes.
What led you to Hardly Competent?
So, hardly competence. was actually started out as an alliance called Blackheart Syndicate, and I formed that with another group called Blacklight Operations. So it was supposed to be kind of like a mix of our two names. We grew, took in other corporations like Meteor Industrial and some others. Um, we grew. We eventually got pushed into low sec, and we had to kind of fight our way to survive there for a bit. Had a little tangle with Snuffed Out, and we eventually ended up changing our name to Hardly Competent after that tangle with Snuffed Out not going super well in our favor. So we just kind of you know owned the failure and then just took it and decided let's turn this into something we can use. So failure into success is a really core part of what we do. And so yeah, Hardly Competent came out of that. I'm one of the leaders and founders of that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really step foot into LoSec without getting some experience with snuffed out.
No,
So
for sure.
that follows through with most people's experiences. But tell me a little bit about when you say you got pushed out. You got pushed out of high sec. How did
Yes.
that happen? It was a war deck or
It
something?
was it was fantastic. So we had like lots of moon mining structures up, and of course, even with the war deck changes, of course, those can be destroyed, and because people can declare war on your holding corp, that's fine. Well, the corporation that declared war on us, they were called Blackheart Syndicate. They're a wormhole corporation, very small, but they got their alliance involved as well, and they were basically like, "We don't like that you have our name, and so we're going to declare war on you." And so I turned them down multiple times. I was like, well, mechanically speaking, corporation's a corporation, an alliance is an alliance. There's not really that much confusion. They kind of tried to create a lot of drama around it and eventually declared war. At the time, we were like pure industry. We had almost no PvP experience. A few individuals had PvP experience, but just as an alliance, we had almost none. So we tried to fight. We actually had some friends come and help us. The war deck mechanics at the time made it to where we couldn't like remote rep each other in different fleets, or not in different fleets. Sorry, when our allies came to assist us, we couldn't remote rep each other without getting concorded, and so that was a really fascinating experience. We ended up getting pushed out, and that's how we ended up in low sec in the first place.
Yeah, that high sec war deck mechanic has come a long way, but not recently, a few months ago, FedUp got into a bit of a high sec scuffle on a war deck, and we experienced the same problem. Right, we couldn't rep, allies, even though they were co-war decked, and it was just. I think that needs a little bit
Mhm.
more working out. Like you should be part of Eve is to be able to, formulate your friends and like work together. So I think that part's still a little broken.
Absolutely. I
Um,
mean, I know that came out of fixing the neutral rep issue, which that was a big problem, and that needed to be fixed. But yeah, there definitely needs to be a way for people who are allied with you in the same war to actually form a cohesive fleet.
yeah, I get the reasons why maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea either, but hopefully that continues to be iterated on because I think it's an important part of how Eve works. But so that war deck didn't go well for you. You wind up in Losec. Where in Losec did you first go?
We were over in the Sagain pocket for a while, over in Tashmerkin.
Tashmarkan, okay. And you got into a scuffle at Snuff, and then you reformed a. I guess it's a coalition. There are other alliances in Hardly Competent.
No, so Hardly Competent is the alliance, with different corporations. Now, Kairos Initiative, that's our coalition, and we formed that a bit later. So after we moved out from Sagain, we moved over to the Gatamom area. Still Tashmerkin, I believe, and or Bit Domain. Sorry, it's right around there, very close together. And yeah, we formed the Kairos Initiative with Deep Space Alliance, and shortly after that, we moved over to the area that we're in now near Provi.
Yeah, okay. So transition to you're now interacting or running into Pravi Holdings and Losec and Pravi Group located mainly in the Providence region of Nullsec, which is really just south of where you are, right? Um,
Hmm.
they tend to be a hotbed for activity and content for a lot of people because they're sort of a large group. They don't shy away from like tangling with people, and it's sort of like a fun group to mess with. I personally didn't know that they've been under pressure, and we'll get to this later, in Nullsec from Wrecking Crew. But I guess you guys have also been applying pressure to their holdings in low sec. So what do they have in low sec that you're so interested in?
So whenever we first moved, to this low sec area, our mindset was okay. We want to try to build something organized. We want to, establish something of our own here. And one thing that we, of course, had to come to terms with was you have to get funding, for your goals, whether that's SRP stations. Now, there were some R16 moons, R32 moons around. We could take those and mine those, but the amount of time invested in mining those, uh, for funding or doing other things for funding was just taking so much time. It was very difficult, really, to get anywhere with that. Now there are a few R64 moons, in the low sec area that we're in, and at the time, Provi Block actually held a good chunk of those, and so that's actually, that's what we saw as a good opportunity for us to be able to secure funding for ourselves. Provi Block is, of course, a much larger, null set group. They have plenty of offerings that they already have control over up, and so for us, it was just kind of like, well, they don't necessarily really need these low sec moons. It's not like they're that great compared to null sec anyway. So let's try to take these and try to go for some of this area, and let's try to kind of claim it for ourselves. So that's how we ended up
Mm,
over here and started hitting some of the stations in the area.
interesting. So then what's the fighting like? I got some battle reports. Are any of these moon fights like a battle in Gadaman?
Gatomom, so those are some from whenever we were first beginning to form the coalition. That's when we were grouping up, fighting off like White Sky and stuff. This was just around the time that Shoot First was starting to collapse, right around
Hmm.
that time.
Okay.
So yeah, because we were a little bit involved with them and with their war against White Sky. Just it was a good content opportunity, good chance for us, for my alliance, to really start to learn PvP and do more with that. And it was good for that. But yeah, that's what the one that you're looking at there from Gatamom. Let's see. I think there should be a battle report from maybe Valmu. Let me take a look and see. Yeah, there's one from Valmu.
Yep. Okay. This one. Yep.
Yeah. Now that one was over an R64, and I believe that one was over either a whole timer or that was whenever we were putting up a moon. So we did successfully kill it. So one thing that kind of kept happening, you asked about how the fighting is. So what we would find, especially at the initially, we would form up maybe 15 to 20 guys, to go hit a station, and probably would respond with about 60 guys, or so, to put us down after we got to an armor timer or a whole timer. And so what we would end up doing is we would always try to, only hit the timers. Well, not only, but we try to hit almost every timer. But we found that we could really only hit the timers that were just outside of Provi's main time zone. So we started to really kind of focus on those. We actually were able to kill a few extra stations, just doing basic cleanup in the area. R64s were always much better defended. Probably would form up in almost every time, to defend those, understandably. But we were, constantly well outnumbered, 3 to 1, 4 to 1 on a regular occurrence. And it was also around this time that like Care Factor would just start bridging guys in to like drop on our orcas that were mining, or probably would come in and blob our guys. So there was this kind of tension that kept escalating as we were operating the area, and they decided to take advantage of it and start attacking us. So what we ended up doing was we talked with Recking Crew, who of course have been very involved in nullsec, and I think they enjoy looking for content to hop in on. So we were able to say, hey, look, we have an R64 timer here if you'd like to be involved. And in this case, they did. So we ended up being able to actually take an R64 moon for ourselves and put it up and help with some of our funding and our goals. So
Yeah. Wrecking Crews certainly did show up. A lot of supers here. Uh,
yeah, for sure.
I'm assuming that Provi maybe did not expect Wrecking Crew supers. Like so, I don't know what happened here, but this looked like they dropped dreads on you and then Wrecking Crew supered them from a distance.
Yeah, yeah. This was it ended up becoming a larger battle. I mean, it escalated quick. I was actually there for this one, and yeah, so we formed up to fight. Probably did escalate, very quickly, and then Wrecking Crew, yeah, they counter escalated quite heavily. But yeah, so
Yeah.
we've kind of continued, to try to push for more in low sec. We were able to take a few more R64s. which has been very very helpful for us. We can actually start functioning a little bit better as a group, and we've enjoyed that. The content has been good. We enjoy doing like little roams and stuff into Provi as well. Our coalition actually managed to take a small little foothold system in Provi. I think Provi Block actually made a Reddit post about it not that long ago. Talking about how it's not a very strategic system, but it is fun to have just as a little nullsec base. So
Yeah, interesting. What system was that?
Extacar, Wrath owns it. They work with us a lot.
Okay.
They're also one of the smaller alliances in the area with us in deep space.
And I see. I also have a battle report from BTAC-W, which I believe some of my guys were even in. You guys were in this fight as well.
Yes, yeah, I believe I was there for that one too. Yeah, that was one where it was just kind of like, hey, here's a little content opportunity. Um, I mean, obviously, it ended up being a pretty big content opportunity. But yeah, so we were able to come up here for that and just really just kind of participate and see what big fleet stuff's like. Most of the people in my alliance, they haven't done massive fleet combat before or dealt with tie dye or anything like that. So this was a fun opportunity.
Yeah, and Wrecking Crew is sort of exploding at the moment. It's like one of those hot groups at the moment. Ever since Sadao went over from Test, I think, over to be part of the Wrecking Crew coalition. It's a coalition of a bunch of different alliances, um, and they're growing pretty huge, pretty fast. So, are you gonna continue to work with them and sort of what's your plans for nullsec? You gonna maybe help them because they've been pressing Provi blocks null holdings for, geez, a year, 2 years probably. It's sort of been this like slow burn fight for a long time. But, like doesn't really get anywhere because their sovs are kind of opposite time zones.
Right, right.
Wrecking Crew made a little bit of progress in Blackout because they were able to camp their ADMs down low enough where they can like strike in a few of those systems. But they've been kind of like deadlocked for a while. But with Wrecking Crew getting so big, they're becoming a bigger threat. So, is there plans to continue to work with them or?
I think we'll just kind of have to see how things end up. Like I said, I think that they're very opportunistic whenever it comes to content. I think we'll probably each provide each other extra content that we can jump into from time to time, but we'll just kind of.
Yeah, so Wrecking Crew, like if under Sadal's leadership, Sadal will tell you it's all about fun per hour, right? So whatever it is
Right,
like
right.
that gets them action at the moment is what they're gonna do, um, which is pretty neat. But that solve conflict uh, could probably get you some good stuff because a lot of groups head that way anytime there's a timer.
No, definitely, that's true, and I have noticed, it does tend to heat up really, really quick whenever timers come up. I mean that one that we just looked at, that massive null timer where Test was involved, and I think even PH, it's pretty huge. So it gets interesting. I mean, I say it's huge. It's huge from my perspective. We don't field a whole lot of people comparatively, but
Yeah, I mean, if it's a content provider for you, then definitely stick with it. So you take some moons for them in Losec. Have they hit you back at all? Have they made any attempts to take them back?
They have to some degree. We do. We time zone tank them, so it does help. And that's just how it works, unfortunately, in some ways.
Oh,
But
yeah, put
yeah,
them in the
so
U.S. time zone.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So and that does help some. But yeah, they have actually. So most recently, and I shared with you just that little kill mail. Most recently, they decided, hey, we're tired of being harassed. They actually stopped mining in low sec. They stopped pulling moons for a while. When they did pull moons, we'd kill miners. Several people, actually, a few of them offered to sell off their assets to us, like corporations that were in Provi that were had assets in low sec. So they were really starting to kind of, I think, at least in this area where we have so many people, they were starting to feel the pressure and weren't able to do a whole lot because we have people around all the time. So they most recently decided that they were going to, kind of give us a taste of their own medicine, of our own medicine, so to speak. They've started roaming through. You could see where I think it was, 20 or 30 people on a covered or kill where they roamed over to one of our low sec systems and they found a cover to kill that their 30-man fleet. They killed it and then I think went away for a bit. So they're starting to kind of roam through in larger fleets just to try to pick up some extra kills and content and be a little bit more oppressive in the area.
Yeah, you mentioned the Care Factor Alliance in Provi, and the rumors have it that they're kind of coming apart, and parts of them may join Wrecking Crew. So
Oh, really? Okay, interesting.
you may be flying with the Care Factor people shortly.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that. But yeah, I mean, honestly, from a few of the talks that I've had with them, they just seemed quite content to keep doing what they're doing. So that's interesting to hear. But yeah, they loved they bridged on top of us a few times. They would actually use proxies. There are some people with neutral alts who had come through, harass us regularly, and then if things got a little bit hot, they would bridge and Titan bridge over to us and try to deal some more damage. So very interesting to kind of see how Provi Block likes to operate outside of their main area. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Provi's an interesting group because they have like the core groups, like Severance and those guys that kind of operate together, and but then like Care Factor was sort of like a um, not obscure, but like an off branch a little bit of Provi and kind of operated on their own a little bit. And like, so Provi's interesting with the different culture bases that they have inside the bigger coalition.
Right, right. I have a few friends who are actually, they were part of Provi for a while. Most of it was a long time ago, though. Um, and they've talked about it. Said it's a really unique kind of place, unique kind of atmosphere. Um, but I think that I don't know. I think it's really interesting, like what's happening to them politically and internally. Yeah, even though that the information about Care Factor is new to me, I have heard that there have been some tensions on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, Care Factor's an interesting group. Like, I think they've been struggling for a little bit. Fed Up took on a corp that came from Care Factor a little while ago, and I guess that didn't really go over well. So Care Factor decided to Cloaky Camp Fed Up staging for a couple of days, stating in local they were only there to kill the corp that we took. So that didn't go over too well, considering legacy alliances have been fairly friendly and helpful to Pravi. So that caused a little bit of drama for them probably with Pravi because we just marched up there and started rifling this stuff, and that didn't go over well with Pravi. So I don't know what's going on with Care Factor. I think they're just going to split up, and some of the groups will go one way or another. But I heard some of them are going to Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really interesting situation to see, especially with how old CVA is. I mean, CVA has been around in the game, of even longer than I've played, and it's really interesting to see such a historic group, involved in a larger conflict like this. And since this is my first time back in the game for a really long period and being heavily invested, I'm kind of getting to see all these different aspects of groups that I haven't gotten to see in the.
Yeah, it's great. So talk to me about what are the plans for Hardly Competent? What's your dream, your goal? Where would you like to be in a few months to a year?
So our long-term goal as an alliance, actually, it has always been Sovnol. Whenever we formed it, we talked and we said, all right, what do we want to do? What does our big goal need to be? And Sovnol came up, and a higher level wormhole space came up, and we agreed that Sovnol seemed a bit more feasible at the time. I say feasible. It's a very difficult thing to try to achieve, especially if you're not going to try to go through a major block. But it's still something we wanted to kind of push for a little bit more on our own, and enough of our guys didn't like wormholes for that to be the other option, the better option. Um, so I would say 3 to 6 months or so, I would really like to see our PvP force grow. We're trying to do more roams into Provi, uh, and just get good practice. Now, of course, when you have like 30 to 60 man fleets dropped on you, and you take a 10 to 15 man fleet, it's kind of hard to get that good practice in Provi. But That said, it's still there. It's still experience, and so we're trying to kind of train people up, get some practice, and learn, and then eventually be able to kind of take something for ourselves one day, whether that's Provi or somewhere else. Sobnol is still our big goal.
Yeah, the region of Pravi is a little bit difficult to get practice because they are such a big group, right? So like sometimes people
Hmm.
like accuse them of blobbing or whatever, but it's not like you can picture yourself as an FC, right? And there's a group in your space and you ping for a fleet. You can't just like say,
Right.
okay, I'm capping this at 15 dudes because we don't want to blob them, right? It doesn't kind of work like that. So
Yeah.
when
In
you get
general, you just take as much as you get, and so
yeah, but
yep,
there's other regions in the space that you might be interested in. Like I still think the North is very interesting. The Venal, Veil of Silent, that kind of area up there, with a bunch of small
it
gangs
is.
and
Yes.
stuff to play around with. But
Yep, I've been looking there. When we actually a while back, we kind of we took an evaluation for ourselves, and we said, all right, are we ready for null? And ultimately the answer at the time was no. But we were saying, all right, if we were to go somewhere, what are some options? That was one of the ones we kind of looked at, just because you do have those smaller groups who are still kind of they'll fight each other, they'll provide a lot of content. It's interesting, and you can actually get some pretty healthy experience and a little bit more, I guess, equal fights in some of those areas.
yeah, I think we talked with you guys a while back now. Um, I think when Ron was still on the show, right? And he was trying to convince you to come Legacy side.
Yeah, yeah. He told me to talk with Test, and to talk with Test Diplos if I needed anything. And but yeah, we talked a little bit. But yeah,
Is that big block that got you shied away, or you know,
I mean, to some extent, like we want to try to build something that's a little bit unique as far as atmosphere goes, and and also just it's fun to try and do your own thing. And so that's something that we're still working on, still doing. And we are enjoying that. It's been a really really good, if very difficult process. But yeah, we kind of we saw the big block and we looked at that as an option, and we just decided, we would probably lose our identity and get absorbed if we were to join a big block, and we wanted to keep doing our own thing.
yeah, no, I totally hear you on that. I mean, it is difficult to keep yourself when you become a big. People will just refer to you as legacy, right?
Right, right.
Which is kind of difficult. But so since the last we spoke, your goal is still Savnal, but you're kind of hanging out in Losec right now. What's the atmosphere like in Losec right now? Is there content for you there at all besides the Provi stuff? Like, can you roam up to the northern parts of maybe the Minmatar war zone or anything and get any sort of because I know like dock workers are up there, and I know you're probably I don't know if you're officially blue to Wrecking Crew or any of their allies.
Right. I mean, we've like had some some minor standings here and there. Um, I know, like, we are blue with some, but it kind of varies a little bit. There's like I said, they definitely maintain their.
Yeah, so like I know dock workers is up there. Are they able to provide you any content from a lowsec standpoint?
Like, we could head up there, but honestly, we've actually gotten a little bit more content, like popping through wormholes and things like that into nullsec areas, and we've had a lot of fun with that sort of thing because, I mean, they spawn every once in a while, and it's a good roaming opportunity. So we've like most of our smaller content, that's actually been one of the best.
Yeah, that's a very Wrecking Crew thing to say. So like you're wearing off on you a little bit. Wrecking Crew makes big use of wormholes to get their content, and they
So actually, one of our last PvP director in my alliance, he was an ex snuffed out Volta guy, and
there
he
you
was one
go.
of the ones who really pushed for a lot of that, and so we kind of started to adopt it a little bit. That's and my alliance probably does that more than others in the area, but that's one of our better ways to find interesting content.
Yeah, wormholes. I don't know. Like a lot of people complain that it's broken. That you can really be, if you set up right, you can get to anywhere in New Eden in like 10 to 15 minutes of work if you like find yourself a nice C2 with a null static and just roll it. Like Volta does that
Hmm.
in Thera, and a bunch of groups do that. But I think it's a great way to shrink down space, right? And we do it quite often too. We do too much whaling through it, but a lot of times like we love the north, so we'll find that hole and go north a lot, like get up into to Venal where Veil is silent. It's definitely a good tool. What about the filaments? You've been using any of the filaments?
We have, yeah, and filaments have been fantastic. Of course, whatever you take into a filament, you expect to not bring back. So we kind of work around that. It's come up with some really neat little doctrines and changes. We've had a lot of fun. We've tried out lots of different ships, and we're still trying out more. But filaments have been a great way for us to find content, and it's not super expensive for it either. So it's
Yeah, filaments are probably one of the best things CCP has come up with in years, right? Because you said it's a one-way trip. Basically, what you're undocking in is something that's disposable, which in other groups see as bite-sized, right? So you're gonna show up
right.
at a 15-man, I don't know, T1 cruiser fleet, and people are gonna
Hmm.
be like, "Oh, I don't need to like drop the hammer on that. I can just beat it with my solo battleship." Sometimes, you'll get those guys that will come out and like give you a fun fight. And I really love the filaments. It really has encouraged people to go out and do something, and for the people sitting in their space to respond accordingly. It doesn't always work out, but very often you'll see groups that are typically known for like just punching you in the face with supers actually undock something and fight you with it.
Absolutely, and yeah, that's one. I mean, there are occasions where we've ended up into different areas of null where we do get blobbed really really quick, and at that point it's just like props to the response team for hitting us that fast. But there have been other times where we've got guys who maybe took out some interesting doctrines like remote rep vexors, and just are at each other for the entire fight or set of fights, and you have people in much larger ships trickling in that they're able to take down and keep going. But it's just fascinating stuff that you couldn't always get to work, but it just happens to work really well in this situation, and in something disposable. So yeah, I mean, you just get some fascinating stuff with them.
I did want to get your opinion on some of the changes that have come through recently too, and how they may affect your group.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
Specifically, like what about all the surgical strike stuff lately? Um, does anything like that affect your doctrines, like the reduction in resist mods? Anything like that concern you? I did have one group say, well, a lot of smaller groups rely on that high resistance, able to receive reps to fight upwards. Have you noticed anything like that?
So I would say, yeah, to some degree. Even some of our fittings, we try to make the most out of them as possible because we're a smaller group. So that's definitely gonna, probably have some sort of a hit to us. To some extent, you know, once you reach a certain, I guess, number past what you're bringing to the table, it really doesn't matter that much. Now it maybe matters a little bit less, and with what we've been up against, with pretty regular 3-to-1 odds, 4-to-1 odds, with probably, it's really not gonna change the results of that, too much if we were to stay and fight, and not play it a little bit more like nano or more guerrilla warfare. So I think that for us, that part doesn't have as much of an impact, at least on a coalition doctrine level. Now, on an alliance level, we have been developing some new doctrines, trying to play around with some like the T2 close range changes, doing just lots of interesting things with some of the buffs and nerfs, trying to really just kind of take advantage of them first if we can, see if they're really viable, try and make some new strategies around them. But yeah, we're playing around with that as an alliance more so than anything else. And if they work really well, we may try to escalate them to a coalition level.
Do you find that it's easier to kill stuff as a small group? Like, do you ever run into like a brick tank something and you're like, damn, I just can't break this? Or is it easier to kill
Well, I
stuff
mean,
now?
yeah, I mean, if you're using like Tech 2 close range ammo, for sure. The big thing that I've noticed is that your smaller ships can do so much more. So you already had a pretty good. So for me, I love flying small stuff personally. Big fleets, they can be really cool, but I love little things, whether that's frigates or cruisers. Cruiser size and down is great. So what I found is really the smaller stuff can do so much more damage, and you can take out more with it. Now your tank can't necessarily survive much longer. You're going to have to pick and choose your fights based on the damage application, what you're up against. But as far as the damage you can put out, you can break tanks if you've got just a few people instead of having to have twice, well, not quite twice as many, but you can break the tank and possibly within your survival time and get a good kill on something nice more often than you could before.
Yeah, I do need to pause, and I'm gonna butcher this name, but Paladin Templar. Paladin Templar. Thank you for the tier one subscription. I appreciate that. Um, yeah. So also, you said you like smaller ships, but CCP's really been trying to show the battleship some love.
Yes.
With warp speed upgrades and everything else. The resistance mod's got a hit, but the battleship hull is getting a little bit of a hull buffer pump, and just scan resist improvements and like frigate bays. Is any of that interest you? Like, what do you think of the frigate bay?
I think the frigate bay is going to be really niche, but I think that you're going to end up with large fleets. I mean, to me, the best use for it is to drop some sort of electronic warfare in it. If you're using battleships in a fleet, you kick one of those out when you die. Hopefully, you jam out one or two things, and then maybe you turn the tide in your favor. But I think that just depending on how things work, it could just end up with a slower fight, not necessarily with the fight shifting in a direction. But it also may depend on, if you're up against two battleship fleets, that might be the case. If it's a battleship fleet versus a mutant fleet, it might be a little bit more interesting, I guess. But larger null combats uh, is something that I'm still fairly new to myself, and so I really can't speak on that a whole lot. But whenever it comes to maybe smaller gang stuff, I think battleships are always going to run to the issue of if you end up with something that is much more mobile than you and still puts out tons of damage, you're still going to run into issues.
Yeah, like the heavy assault cruiser.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
exactly. I mean, there's a
good.
reason it's still so strong, and it's still a main fleet option.
Yeah, I mean, CCP kind of took a swing at the more popular hacks. Well, one hack, right, the Munin, specifically have been trying to whittle down a little bit, and then like the T3 cruiser, like the Loki, extremely strong, took a power hit. Bullet ships, in my opinion, still pretty valuable and would give Battleship Comp a rough time. Um, but I do see, from my standpoint, these changes sort of shifting people off closer to armor and like control mids. You see that? Like we have this emergence of the sacrilege fleet. Like,
Right, right.
I ran into it up north and then adopted it as a doctrine myself a few months ago, and now I see it going from where it was pretty viable as a small to medium gang ship because you have all those mids for E-War, to now I see big fleets flying them. And in fact, even Wrecking Crew, I saw flying them over their loved zealots. Like, what do you think of that meta shift? Is that better, worse than Munin?
Oh, I'm not sure yet. I mean, I'd really like to see what the results are, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be worse. I think that if you've brought down the power level of something to where other ships can actually see play, I think that's ultimately a good thing. Now, whether all of those ships still need to be brought down some, or if there need to be more adjustments to other ships and bring them up a little bit, that's different. But I think that if any of the changes are creating more variety in what's viable, then I think that they've probably been pretty good changes overall.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the shift to E-War. I mean, it's a pain in the neck, but it adds an element to a fight that I was getting very bored, and I think Eve in general is getting very bored with the artillery meta, right? Where you're just like
Yes.
lining up old colonial war style and just volleying each other until you cull one side down enough where they can't volley you anymore. Like there's not a whole lot of gameplay there. I mean, I think people like Elo would do it very well because you'll be able to like chase and do some maneuvering, but at the end of the day, it was just N minus one, man. And like, if you just didn't have enough to overcome their volley, you weren't going to win the fight. I think this shift puts Logi back in the game a little bit because
Hmm.
that volley meta, your Logi pilots are kind of bored. Like they would just watch their targets disappear before they can rep them.
Right.
Um, so now you got this meta for E-War, lower volley, even lower DPS. The Sacrilege is sort of anemic on DPS, really. Like tops out at like 400 DPS, which isn't a lot. Um, but then you also got the nerf to the facts. What do you think about those and the impact there? Only one
Well,
cap booster.
right, right. I mean, so from what I've seen, obviously you have I believe it's the Nanazu. I haven't flown Vax, but I believe it's the Nanazu that's really hit really hard by it. And then wormhole groups are going to have a really interesting time trying to solo Vax now. But I think that one thing that we've seen, and this has been brought up on other TIS shows as well. I think is just that it's used a lot of times in smaller groups to be able to not have to
It's like
rely
the
on
I
having.
win button,
Well,
right?
it is a lot of times, but it's also I don't have to have 6 to 8 logi. I can have this one thing and have more DPS, which is it's fine. It's great for smaller groups, but I think in general, if you're up against a group your size or a larger group, that's up against you, especially a larger one, Vax may not make that much of a difference because the enemy side can probably drop a Vax too. So I don't know. Now, of course, I haven't been in a whole lot of smaller scale fights, to see this always play out. But I would imagine that Vax generally just made it to where it was an overwhelming win instead of maybe a more balanced fight or an okay. I could be wrong on that, but
No, I think that the hit to the cap booster was exactly what it needed. It makes it a much less viable sub cap Logi ship. It'll perform a
yes.
lot better in a larger scale fight, um, where not a bunch of little things are dying all the time, or you're being swarmed by 50 frigates with newts on it and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
so I kind of like that they've shoved the facts away from that small gang subcap, and more emphasis on cruiser logi and subcap logi and E-War. And yeah, somebody in the chat said the Serb is king right now. Yeah, the Cerberus is also a good ship, but I see a lot of people, um, leaning towards the side of the armor hack again. Like that sacrilege is so good with those mids, man. You could load tracking disruptors, jams, missile disruptors, missile computers. The sack is so versatile. You can brawl, you can fight from range. It's, you know, quickly becoming the flavor of the month, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, and it can kind of survive some of the newer changes a little bit better than some others.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, for sure. I do think that like I said, with the fax changes, larger scale stuff, not something I've been super involved in the past. So my relationship to fax is fairly new myself. Um, but I still think it's going to be really interesting to see how things shift. And I know a lot of people were upset about the fax changes, but my view on balance is generally, unless it's completely killing, you know, the capacity to use something, maybe it just has to be used a bit differently. It's not necessarily a bad balance change.
No, I think this was definitely firmly a role change. Yeah, a lot of people used it to fight up, yes. And like you said, they used it so they can just field the whole fleet of DPS. But maybe that wasn't the best spot for it. Um,
Sure.
the last change I wanted to talk to you about is like you're as an aspiring group to take Sov Null. What do you think of mining changes recently and the whole starvation period? Is that I know you're PvP focused space, but one of the
Hmm.
things people do in Null is mine those the spod, right? Does that
Right.
turn you off at all to the idea, or like are people upset?
So it's a really interesting mixed bag. So as it is, as a smaller group, we don't have the massive stockpiles that larger groups do. But we're already faced with the same limitations that they have. So, the mineral changes are actually something I put a whole lot of thought into, because even though, sure, like we do a lot of PvP, like I said, my alliance started out as high sec indie, and we still have maintained a pretty strong industry backbone. So, these changes definitely have a huge impact on us. I know they've had a huge impact on other groups as well. And important thing, I tell everybody in our group is, just remember, everyone else is having to deal with these too. It's not just us. Everyone's going to hurt at some point. But I think that ultimately, it's going to be a really, really cool thing. I think that we're going to see more of a shift to more nomadic mining styles for people who really want to get the most out of everything. And I think that, of course, a lot of this is going to depend on how CCP finishes this up with the dynamic changes that they're talking about. But I think ultimately it could be a very good content driver, and at the very least, it's definitely going to make just sitting in the same system, mining all the time. I think that's going to start to go away, or at least lessen a lot.
Yeah, and just to answer, if you came in late, I'm interviewing Martin Lockhart of Hardly Competent. And do people fly Ishtars these days? They do, but it's sort of slipped to maybe B tier even because you got the Sacrilege, which is the flavor of the month, but also the Zealot is very strong at the moment for an armor hack. So between those two, the Ishtar still has the problem of its main weapons being drones, which is very easy to smart bomb, defang. A lot of fleets struggle with varying degrees of drone control range that your fleet members might have. Like I see this all the time where half your fleet can control to 70, half of them can control to 55, and you're not really effective. So Ishtar suffers a little bit as compared to other boats right now. What do you mean who? His name is Martin Lockhart from Hardly Competent. You should definitely look them up. Very active group in LowSec at the moment, working with Recking Crew, and I think you'll see them pop into null at some point. Do you have your eye on a region yet, or?
We're definitely still keeping our options open. Training our guys is really important to us. Getting new bros more into things first. Yeah, we have a lot of people that we want to train up before we. So at this point, the political landscape could completely change. Before we're ready to take off, we'll have to.
Yeah, I mean that. It's the charm of the midweek show, guys. Like we cover the smaller groups, the up and comings, the future, the ones you might want to recruit yourself into if you're an up and coming player and want to be on the ground floor of something. Speaking of which, you're obviously recruiting, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so for us, one really important thing for us is attitude and atmosphere. We do try to maintain more of a positive atmosphere internally, and we do try to, our mindset is really to take care of people. We want people to, feel comfortable to make mistakes and then to learn from those mistakes and improve. I do think that that's the way forward, and I think that a lot of really long-term Eve players can get caught up in, oh, you have to be really good right away, or you need to just leave. And I've seen plenty of people who, after a large loss, they've just said, "Oh, you just need to kick that person. They don't deserve to be here anymore." And to me, that gets rid of a potentially very valuable person from your alliance or your corporation or whatever. I think that person just needs to be trained up and worked with. So that's something that we really try to take care of our guys. It's something we push for. We expect, like I told you earlier, a failure is the first step to success. For a lot of that's not always the case, but for us, that's the mindset that we'd like to have. And we're definitely trying to take people in, more corporations, more people who are interested in trying to build something a little bit fresh, maybe something that is anti bitter vet in some ways, that is trying to kind of get off the ground floor in a very established game where everything's very established. We're doing something that's not easy at all, and a lot of people, I understand, do not want to put that kind of effort forward, but that's what we're wanting to do, and we're enjoying it right now.
Yeah, where can people find you? You have like a public Discord or an in-game channel?
We don't have honestly, they can we do have a diplomacy channel in game that they can hop into. It's hardly competent diplomacy, and they can just join that channel in game. Honestly, let me. I'm actually going to open that up real quick and make sure I said it right. But if they do a search for our alliance in game, hardly competent, our Diplo channel is linked in there.
No, sir, not a propaganda stream. We're just covering stories and things that are going around New Eden that don't get the mainstream play. Definitely not
I,
propaganda. We cover a different group every week.
I think generally, for smaller groups at least, you guys seem to usually let people, talk a little bit about themselves in the end of it. It's not propaganda. It's just part of letting other groups kind of shine through the larger one.
Yeah, I mean, Eve is an alive place, and Big Block Null Warfare gets the news, the media, and then the glory. But there is so much other stuff going on all around New Eden that you don't see. Um, diplomatic drama on smaller levels. Little groups making their way. You got Martin here has worked his way through high sec war decks into low sec, and then looking to make the next step into null sec, which is sort of like the classic Eve progression. And it's fascinating to hear what it takes to go there. And that's the kind of stuff we try and bring to light on this stream. Um, yeah, okay, we got a few more minutes left. We always like to close the stream with something that you may not know about EVE Online. But before we do that, is there anything else you wanted to cover or mention about your group or what you got going on? Anything we missed?
I think that everything has mostly been hit. I've been waiting on one of my guys to send me a message to be like, "You didn't talk about this." But yeah, no, I think that we probably hit just about everything. And yeah, that's basically it so far. And I'm gonna let you go first on the on
Yeah.
the fun fact.
I've like done so many of these shows now. I've done literally like 50 of them probably. So I don't know that I have one prepared for
That's the
tonight.
thing. I've listened to a lot of TIS, so honestly, I've heard a lot of the ones that have already been brought up on the show, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like that would have been a good one. That would have been a good one." I was thinking about it today. Um, so yeah, honestly, I don't have a great one either. In this case, I think y'all have brought up some really good ones. My favorite is still the micro warp drive cloak trick for haulers, but that gets brought up. It seems like at least a couple times a year. So
Yeah, the good old MWD cloak trick. For years I mined in high sec. And that's how I
okay,
made my first few billion, right? I built up a little mining fleet, and back when IS Boxer was a thing, I used to do that. And I would haul like a billion ISK worth of my compressed ore and a T1 Miasmos all the way through high sec to Jitta. And people are like, "You've never gotten ganked?" I'm like, "No, man, because you just MWD cloak." And they're like, "What the heck is that?" I'm like, "It's easy. Put an MWD and a prototype cloaking device on your Miasmos. When you jump through the gate, you align to where you're going, you click your MWD on, you click your cloak. Once your MWD is about to end cycle, you shut off your MWD, you decloak, and you warp right off.
yep,
It's a little trick to get you up to warp speed faster because the cloak actually acts like a web. It kind of reduces your maximum speed, which gets you into warp faster, which is a really neat trick. But I used to do it in Miasmos. I'd go like 20 jumps across high sec, and people are like, "You're gonna get ganked doing that." I'm like, "It never happened, never."
no, it's great, and you can do it in low sec too. Not going to work as well in null necessarily because of bubbles,
The
but in
bubbles,
low
yeah.
sec, yeah. But low sec it can work great. I remember at one point when we were in Seguin, there's a station over there where a lot of asset safety stuff goes to, and there were a couple of guys. Actually, it was one guy with his alts coming through and bestowers hauling stuff in and out. And we tried to catch him for forever. And this was around the time that I actually learned about the trick. And he would just, he would do the exact same thing. He would always warp off before we could ever, catch him. And of course, we weren't going to be able to. Well, we weren't able to bump him at the time to be able to knock him out and keep him from warping. But yeah, it's fantastic. It works really well. I eventually recruited him.
Yeah. In nullsec, it's still a thing, even in a bubble, because you can coast and make it hard for them to decloak you. And also, if
Yes.
you use an octator, you could fit, micro jump drive or a medium micro jump drive and boost yourself out of the bubble and then cloak up while you're lining out. So there's options in nullsec for those tricks too to survive.
Uh, Definitely. Yeah. It's not quite as guaranteed as it would be in others, but definitely.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having you back on the show and talking about your group. I hope you do eventually find your way out to a null spot and stake your claim at some point. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you having me on the show. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy listening to it and being on it's fun.
I appreciate it. So yeah, people are asking when the next podcast is. Talking Stations has a bunch of different shows. You can catch Matterall daily during the day U.S. time zone. He covers pretty much all the breaking news stuff. So if there's patch notes that dropped or big fight that happened, you can catch up on all the breaking stuff then. Then there's the Sunday show, which covers some of the bigger type news and bigger personalities. Then my show every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, which is 23:59 Eve time, just before the clock turns. Um, but yeah, that'll do it for us today on Talking in Stations. I will see you next week.